You're listening to the We Are Libertarians podcast network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com. You're listening to the We Are Libertarians podcast network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com. Welcome to the Chris Spangle Show. My name is Chris Spangle, and this is a continuation in one of my favorite series here on the show. It is The Swamp Explained with Rob Quartel. And Rob is a 45-year fly-on-the-wall in Washington, D.C. Rob's worked for the Republican presidential campaigns of Ford and Bush 1, government agencies like the EPA, and has been confirmed by the Senate to the Us Federal Maritime Commission. He's also been a candidate for Congress and Senate. He spent years working in private technology and that sector in Washington, D.C. with startup companies. And so he has a lot of experience and a lot of iconoclastic viewpoints, some of them towards you libertarians, some of them towards Republicans and Democrats. So he always gives us a great insight into the swamp that makes up our nation's capital. Always like to understand how things work before you can deconstruct them, right? So, Rob, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah.
How are you today?
Yeah, how are you? Long time.
I know. I think it's been about a month. We tend to check in monthly, it feels like.
Yeah.
I think we kind of talked about the January 6th stuff, but
we did.
You know, a lot of swampiness has taken place since then, now that traditional Washington is back in charge, as I might call it. But first, I want to talk about COVID, because COVID seems to be turning the corner. It's, you know, the vaccines, you know, here in Indiana, when you look at the numbers in Indiana, you've got 25% of the state is vaccinated. Another 20% has confirmed positive tests. And then there's people like me who, you know, telehealth said, we don't know what you have, but we think you have it, since you don't want to spend $900 on a test in April. So, you know, we may have 50 to...
And by the
60.
end of May, you're going to have your shot anyway. So.
Right. So there's a ton of positive news on that front. And Florida is as crowded as ever.
They declared a state of emergency down in Miami last night.
Did you see that? They were rolling...
Unbelievable.
Here's the thing.
By the way, I got my shots.
Yes, which I'm going to ask you here in just a second. You know, I'm watching on Twitter last night as SWAT teams start rolling into Miami because there's thousands of people on the street. And we're in Indianapolis right now, where the NCAA is holding the tournaments, where they're flying tens of thousands of people into Indiana and Indianapolis to hold this tournament. Functionally, what's the difference between people going to Miami for spring break and the March Madness stuff, minus the government saying it's okay in Miami versus it being sanctioned here in Indiana?
So are people required to wear masks in the stadium, and are they not social distancing?
There's social distancing, but there is
well,
some
down
spacing.
in Miami, and all these young people, the social distance is a quarter of an inch.
That much?
Yeah, frequently less.
Yeah,
I do think I think both are experiments. They did a couple concerts in Germany about 6 or 8 weeks ago, and did some social distancing and masking and new air conditioning and air handling kinds of technology, and they had no spread in that.
I didn't see one in the Super Bowl in Tampa either.
Yeah. That's the same idea.
Yeah.
But it is so fascinating, I'm 70. My state of Virginia was a cluster. I won't repeat the rest of that. for most of the first several months, we have a doctor as a governor, a Democrat, and he basically held back half of the supply so you could have the double shot, while at the same time the federal government was holding back half of the supply so you could get the second shot. So the governor basically doubled down to make a crisis of its own here in Virginia, and eventually they got a new guy and they figured that out. But I signed up here in January, early January, as did my wife. She got a call about 6 weeks later that she might be able to run right over and get it, but it didn't happen because she didn't pick up the phone. None of us anymore pick up phones when it doesn't say who's calling you.
Exactly.
They gave no callback number. And in the meantime, the District of Columbia was actually rolling it out to people, residents over 65. And we still have a residence there too. So I went online, and I'm a fast typist, and their site was sort of kludgy. I actually couldn't get a place the first time. After I got all my data in, and then I finally found a place that had appointments available. And as I clicked each appointment in a row, they all disappeared, and they only released 1,200. And the district released a number on Thursdays for specified zip codes intended to be for people, high risk people and populations, Black and Latino and all that. And I can't say that I had ever, in all those 45 years, lived in any of those zip codes in DC, so I wasn't eligible for that. But on Fridays, if you're over 65, you could get it. Well, so the first time I missed it totally. Second time I went on with my wife, I had figured out how to game this damn thing. So I'm typing fast. I go to the middle of the locations, not the first, second, third.
Boomers are turning into hackers to get their vaccines.
Yeah, I go to the middle of the appointments without looking and just clicked it. And then I saw my wife, who's a 2-finger typist, and shaking. She was just so nervous. And so I started to get hers, and I almost got hers. She never did. And then the following week, they released a few more each time. And I got my wife, and I got a neighbor. And I couldn't get her husband. And then the next week, it turns out in the interim, the neighbor had not gotten her notice of the appointment. I had already been to DC. I got my shot. My wife went the following week, got her shot. In my case, they gave me the second appointment right there. I didn't have to ever do another thing. My wife's case, they told her to call she could go to one of 3 websites. She did, not one worked. But the district had a really good mop-up operation. And literally 2 or 3 days later, they called her to see if she had gotten into the website. And she said she had not. And they told her how to do it. She got her second one done. In the meantime, this fourth time I go in, and I get my neighbor's husband. And then I'd go try to do her again. I thought, well, maybe I'd screwed it up. I didn't punch this button or that. And I finish it, and it says, your appointment is like tomorrow. And so I had not screwed up. They not notified her. And so she drove to DC, got it. So now my whole pod is shot, second shots, except for one young woman, the wife of one of the 70-year-olds is like 50. 51 or 2. And one of the other neighbors saw her the other day and said to her, this is probably the first time in your life you wished you were 65.
Well, this is a great illustration because, so much of COVID, because this is one of the few times in our lives moving forward that I think we'll see the same thing happen all over. And it's the first time in my life where I've truly seen the differences in state and local governments comparatively. Totally. In the beginning, you look at, and this has not been a good year for the government's track record. When you look at the failure of testing, but when you look at the vaccine rollout, here in Indiana, we'll be in the 30s here in the next week or two.
Yeah, well, and Virginia is pretty close. So we went from the 48th worst to the top 15 or so. But I will tell you, Chris, this is like one of my other friends about your age said she had visions of like a New Yorker cartoon with old people dancing in the park and smoking dope. They've gotten gamboling, they've gotten their shot. And I will tell you, it is like that.
I believe it. I believe it. I had it early on, and so I haven't felt the same level of concern for it that, and I don't have the underlying conditions. But I'm sure, I know for my mom who's in her 60s in the ICU working and, high blood pressure, she was very concerned. And I know you've been very, very careful with it out of necessity. Yeah. Same with my dad. Yeah. So it's just a different sense of urgency for going back to normal life, between the two of us.
And as predicted, wearing your mask and all that, I think you and I talked months and months ago about the mask thing that, whatever it did on COVID, one effect was going to be reduce the impact of flu and the other contagious diseases. And we're now seeing that in the CDC numbers.
I haven't been sick all year long. Last year,
I haven't either.
Yeah. The year before, we were, the the kid was going to daycare and coming back with all sort of creepy crawlies, and that hasn't happened this year. And if you look at my friend Brian Nichols, who hosts a program here on the network, he's in Philly, and then I'm here in Indianapolis, and our numbers aren't that much different, but, we've been back to normal basically since June of last year. Brian still can't go to the gym, still can't get a haircut. These small businesses.
And where's Brian? Where's Brian?
Philadelphia.
Philly. So there was another study in the New York Times that showed that Florida, New York were, despite radically different approaches, were not radically different on the key data points. So now, of course, Florida's in the Sun Belt, more outdoor time, longer warm season, and all that kind of stuff. So, but I think a lot of people will learn an awful lot about this, and it will all inure to our benefit in the long run.
I don't know how people in blue states, politicians included, how they don't look at red states like Florida or Indiana and not come to the conclusion that they need to lift restrictions. What are these blue states waiting for?
Yeah. No, I think there is a lot of that. But a lot of the blue states, remember, are also much more dense than places like Florida and the southern states and Virginia even. So so it's going to be interesting. And I do think we said in the last one that I think the Democrats would be smart to give Trump credit for getting that vaccine. Graham Allison, who wrote the great seminal work at Harvard on the Cuban Missile Crisis, that everybody who ever did public policy and most people who ever study any kind of government read his book. And he wrote a terrific piece also, I think in the Times or Post, I can't remember, or maybe it was Wall Street Journal, saying that if Fauci had not been there, would you have gotten the vaccine as fast? Well, probably. If so-and-so had not been there, would you have gotten it as fast? But if Trump had not been there, would you? And the answer is no, you would not, because he made that his thing. And so it's all interesting. Of course, I have this Darwinian thing here going. You have seen, as have I, the numbers on Republicans and Trumpers who don't want to get the shot. And so I really deep down, I hate to admit, harbor some hope that Darwinism works. And
that's the funny thing about this, Rob, is everybody goes, you know what, we need a good plague. And then we kind of got a plague. And it just didn't. It just made things worse. It didn't actually help. No, I think you're right about Trump, and Trump gets enormous credit for driving that, pushing that, and that was
he should get credit.
He should. But the thing about Trump is that he did a lot of good things, but he blew it because then he'd do even worse, more crummy thing. It's like if he had just celebrated the vaccine and how it was about to be rolled out and how it was going to change everything and had run on that, he would have won. Hey, the economy's going to come back after we get this vaccine out. Your life is going to go back to normal. We're almost done with this. Hang on.
Well, and this is to the swamp issue. We will probably be talking later. Had he gotten his administration to agree and the Republican Party to agree to the last check, he might have won too.
Yeah,
a bigger check.
But instead, he did the stolen election stuff, and it's just like, this is why we hate you. Goodbye. It's silly.
Well, so he's not exactly fading away, but he's not exactly, thank goodness, he's not on I don't wake up every morning wondering what the hell he said last night.
Well, he's kind of lazy. I mean,
And I don't say that about Biden either. It's so nice to have a president you don't have to listen to every day.
Yeah. Now, you had a party, so you had a celebration this past. We were supposed to record last week, but you were chopping cabbage. So how was your party?
That's right.
What was it like to get back to it?
It was St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah.
So I had a fantastic, probably the best corned beef I've ever had, I hate to admit, this dish with cabbage and mashed potatoes called colcannon. It's a traditional Irish dish, and I have a twist. I use kind of an Asian cabbage and this and that, and then rainbow carrots and that kind of stuff. But I'll tell you, my best thing was probably soda bread. And there are a million recipes for Irish soda bread. Some have brown flour, some don't. whole wheat, others don't, and this and that. Some have raisins. I'm told the traditional, I read half of the stories say half the traditional is no raisins. Well, way back last fall, I packaged up a bunch of dried fruits, raisins and cranberries and dried orange and mango and all these things. And I filled it with spices and brandy. And it's been sitting in the refrigerator just waiting to be used. And so I threw that in the soda bread, and that was really good. So, I think it was 10 or 12 of us here.
How was it to have a party? I mean, did you feel like you're doing something wrong?
No, actually, my pod, everybody had been vaccinated by then. And,
right.
We have a pod. Everybody's doing this. You have a pod.
Sure.
My pod is 4 families or 4 people my age, roughly here or nearby. And we have, throughout this whole period, we've had several people come visit us, and young people, and everybody took a COVID test before they came, except my brother, of course. And so I think we felt pretty good about managing risk. But then remember, my business in the real life is a company that deals with risk in homeland security and food security risk and all those kinds of things. So I think probably in a lot of ways I'm able to better balance actual risk. And I will say a good example of that today, I just got back from Richmond, and we visited with a younger friend of ours who's probably 42 or 3 and serves on a board with my wife, the Virginia Institute of Marine Sciences. And he and his wife have not gone out anywhere in the last year. They have not been to a restaurant in or out. My daughter is sort of like that. They would go to restaurants outside. They live in Dallas, where they can do that 10 months of the year, except for the week where it was -3 degrees or something, 3 weeks ago. But so it's interesting, other people's assessment of risk. It really does differ, and I think it differs on your experience and your circumstances. And, living on an island, it does make you feel a little more secure.
Yeah, that's been my point about this the entire time, is that voluntarily shelter in place at the beginning because you don't know the risk. But by May, June, we knew what the risks were. We kind of had good data, and then people make their decisions accordingly from there. And like once you saw some of these bigger events and these protests didn't have massive spread, you felt a little more secure and a little less worried. And at Christmas time,
it went up and down, and then it went up and down over the course of the year. We talked about the fact that we broke out in October when it had sort of dipped. Yeah. And we were very careful driving across country to Dallas. We took a slow week and had a great time, but we were very careful. We wore masks. We washed our hands everywhere. We ate outside. It was warm enough. I think once or twice we were inside, and I admit it made us a little nervous. One place we just left. And but you've got to calculate all this. Although, Chris, you and I both have friends who did all of this stuff, and yet they got it. Right. So the CEO of a company on the board of which I sit, they have about 45 people. It's a technology company. They've been remote from the beginning. He was hunkering down in Idaho, and he got it. And he's a big guy. He's healthy, but he's big.
Yeah.
And he had a terrible case for 3 weeks, and he still has the residual effects of it. Of course, we don't know who or why or how that is either. But
I also don't know a single one of my reckless friends that got it.
Well, let's see. I don't know if any of my friends would admit to being reckless, including my 25-year-old friends.
No, I know one. No, but I think that when you look back at the lockdowns, and this is my message from the beginning, like the government intervention in small businesses, picking winners and losers, choosing what businesses can be open or not, none of that worked. None of it was going to work. It was only going to make the entire process much more painful for people. Keeping schools closed has made it more painful for the lower economic classes. And, now there's really like this entire process has always been about an individual's choice of here's what I need to do. Here's how I need to protect myself. Well, I'm
going to push back on you on a little of that because there's a lot of very clear and analysis on restaurants, for example, and interior spaces, and analysis the airflow and how people get zapped by that flow. One person is caught at the beginning, and then everybody else is spread. So there's a lot of data on stuff like that. On the other hand, there's a lot of data on schools where it's the science of infection versus the science of education, and this is one side of society where it's just been utterly irresponsible. The education establishment, in my opinion, has shown itself to be utterly self-fixated and not on the students or education, but the unions on, their retention of power. And so we know that data, the science says little kids need socialization. They need to be right there with a teacher. And whereas older kids don't necessarily have to. And we know that social distancing and all that stuff does reduce the spread. And these are things people could implement in schools, and they just didn't want to do it. And now you've got some teachers still saying, I'm not going back till everybody's vaccinated. And that's kind of, it's insane. It's insane.
I never want to hear it. I mean, I host this program or hosted, I'm stepping down from it on nonprofits here in town, the public affairs show, and called Now Hear This. And you go back and listen to our episodes about, the hunger and the need for food, basically schools are the welfare touch for kids. And there's so many more instances of dead children because they're not getting help at school from counselors. Totally. Or, domestic violence is up because women have had to drop out of the workforce to take care of kids. My girlfriend is a teacher at a school that has been open since last fall. They've had half a week that they shut down just to kind of be safe right before a break. But they haven't had any major instances. And Rand Paul was right when he said, let's look at the private schools like that to see what our future looks like. And it just completely undercuts the teachers' unions. I never want to hear these teachers' unions talk about the disadvantaged again, because they have been, and like, if we're going to pick what class of person gets, the teachers get to jump the line, well, why not the restaurant workers? Why not the people at the grocery store? The people that in May or April, when nobody knew what this was, were terrified to go to work and have continued to go to work. Why don't they get the vaccine before teachers? So I get, it's an instance of, classes getting to jump the line and the government pitting people against each other because of the process. And I just don't think the teachers' unions look great at all.
They've not acquitted themselves well at all.
No,
I agree with
and
that.
they keep digging the hole, and you just go, all right, well, school choice is about to blossom across the nation because we now see where they're really at, which is making sure the teachers' unions get paid.
By and large, however, to your point about individual choice and everything, by and large, the private schools that have stayed open, and certainly the ones I know of in Washington and Virginia and all that, or partly open, have been very, very rigid about enforcing masking, distance, cleaning, all of these things. So we do know these things work. And I was going to say, your friends, you say the ones who are the most careless didn't get it. I am stunned at how many of my friends your age and younger have gotten it, who I know, who all claim they were being very careful, except, one guy decided to go play video games in another guy's basement who he says is being careful, and then somebody else pops in and somebody else pops in. And, and some of these people have had it really badly. And it is random it seems random. We know it's probably not random. As to why you get one effect or another.
Listen, I'm not, and here's the caveats. I'm not anti-teacher. Teachers need to be protected, but 65-year-old teachers can get the shot. 55-year-old teachers, 45-year-old teachers, the most at-risk people are already able to get the shot to go back. And you want them to be safe. And why break this age system that seems to be working well here in Indiana, at least? And then, COVID is very serious and real, but the reality is that you can really only make decisions for yourself. restaurants that have been open in Indiana ask you to wear masks. They ask you to be careful. They have those protocols in place. Same with the schools that have been open. If you have a government like a California or New York that keeps these people from innovating because they're just not allowed to work, they just get poorer and poorer and poorer. So when they can open, they don't have the same protocols that you have here in Indiana. So I think, and I saw somebody, when is the government going to let us reopen? It was never the government's decision to shut us down. It happened voluntarily. People were scared. They were going to stay home. And they're not going to stay home because the government tells them to. They're going to Miami. Like, they don't. And that's the thing. Government follows where the culture is at. And the culture right now is ready to get back to going out.
Well,
and being
it's going to
with
be
people.
interesting to see the cell phone records come out of Miami.
Yeah.
Because remember, you had that way back in the spring last year. And it was very evident that the kids who'd been in Miami were a major source of spread around the country. You could see the time lags between the cell phone and where they ended up, and then the time lag on the disease. So anyway, but I'd say we're going to learn. I hope we learn a lot from all this. There seems to be a consensus that it's going to be with us forever, like flu, and we'll just have to add it to the flu vaccine every year, whatever the latest variant is. And I assume you're going to get your shot at some point.
Maybe. I need to talk to my doctor about it, because it seems that the people who have antibodies already seem to have the worst side effects. So I want to see.
Well, that's because it's like you've had your first inoculation.
Yeah.
And my brother, who we think had it, he had some significant side effects from his first shot. I mean, not debilitating, about like, heavy duty flu vaccine. But
yeah, my mom is the only person that she worked in the ICU all year. And when she got her vaccine, she was really sick for like a full week. My friend who's an EMT got really sick. Everybody else, my grandparents, my coworkers, none of them had any issues whatsoever. Yeah. It's been great.
And for me, it was like a flu shot, only not so bad.
Yeah, so. I will say, I'm a Mac person. I don't want to be to get the shot and feel the urge to start buying Microsoft products. I just don't want to be.
So you're sure it's a plot?
Yes,
by big tech.
If Steve Jobs had created the vaccine, maybe I'd want to get it. But
it's a miracle.
So
technology in this country, and we should take advantage of it.
We'll talk about some of the. Yeah, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I just want to talk to my doctor to see if
Because this is where the right and the left meet. At the end. Remember, we've talked about the fact that Bobby Kennedy's son is on the anti-vax on the left, and they're now meeting at the middle with the right. So
I know, yeah, like I'll have to do the anti-vax show at some point. But so let's talk about some of these articles that you've pulled up before we talk about our own big tech censorship here. You asked me about it. I want to explain it to you on air.
Yeah.
Which of these do you want to start with? The Trump is authoritarian.
I think there have been a number of interesting articles in the last couple of weeks that just sort of distill, I think, this period and some of the stuff that you and I've talked about over the last year. One is called "The Trump is Authoritarian Debate Reconsidered," and you should post these.
I will put these in the show notes for folks. Another
one is "How to Fix 4 Years of Trump's War Against Government. Biden administration must act quickly to repair the damage." Another one is by the Begin Sadat Center for Strategic Studies, and "The Swamp Returns to Washington," referring to the Biden administration bringing a lot of the people who were in Obama back. Another one by Ross Duhat, who's a Times opinion guy on the right. "Did the resistance defeat Donald Trump? Some reasons to doubt a theory." And then we're still seeing things like Elaine Chao is being, there's a criminal referral over there at DOT, Department of Transportation, on her. So I think all of these are talking to well, look, you and I know that everybody wants to analyze everything to death and show that they were right, right?
Right.
So even us.
Yes. That's what this show's about, talking about how we were right about stuff.
That's right. But we are talking about the swamp and the sense of what the swamp is. And, as I've defined it, I think it's the swamp can harbor good animals and bad animals, and good fish and bad fish, and crocodiles and other things, snakes, and it's a metaphor, of course, for DC, and for the mess, and how difficult it is to change things. And I think some of the topics you and I have talked about are that, first of all, it's sort of embedded, but is that a good thing or a bad thing? There's the layer of civil servants who just do their jobs no matter what, but they will move with policy. So if you have a leadership, the head of the Department of Transportation, they will implement whatever an administration wants. They'll try to get that because that's their job. And then there are the lobbyists who are there 50 years for a career. And then there are the congressional staffs, some of whom are professional, like their civil servants. And the same thing as State Department. They have their own equivalent of civil servants and people who are paid just to do this job, use their expertise. Tony Fauci is an expert who's been there for 45 years. He has had a storied career. He probably is the single most critical piece of solving AIDS. And Deborah Bricks, whatever her name was, at the White House, she was she was also part of that. And so these are people who represent, I think, what a lot of people tend to think of negatively as the swamp, but thank goodness, 90% of them are doing the right job. They get out the Social Security checks, they get out the your Medicare checks, they get out or take care of Medicare, they get out the veterans checks. Now, they also screw up those things periodically, but humans are humans. So
yeah, to give you like a historical example of this, of something that I was just reading. I was reading about King Henry III of England, who was king from 1216 to 1272, so like almost 60 years. And he was basically called the simple king. He was basically just he was weak and dumb and just not all there totally. And you have this guy named Simone de Montfort come in. Basically, the barons basically wanted to overthrow him, and you have this clash between future King Edward, Henry's son, Henry Montfort, the barons. You have all this like fighting up at the top on the surface layer, but through Henry's reign, and specifically in this Second Barons War, you have all of the writs of government and all of the functions and all of the earls and all of the the courts, and everything ran really well.
That's right.
And this book that I was reading called Foundation by Peter Ackroyd, and he makes the point that throughout history you see periods where there's all this fighting at the top layer, that everybody pays attention to the great kings and the fighting between the barons and all this stuff, but like down at the bottom there's always the layer of bureaucracy that is always functioning. And it's somewhat insulated from the fighting at the top. And it reminded me of Trump, in that there's all this churn. And Trump supporters would make this argument a lot, like, okay, there's all this churn and Twitter's better now, but the government was functioning just fine. And I really agree with them in that Trump changed politics in a big way, but that didn't necessarily change government in a big way.
Well, and that's kind of the point of this article, and some of the conversations you and I have had. One of these article points out that he had acting cabinet secretaries 30 times more, 30 times greater volume than Obama. And acting secretaries can only do so much. They can't create the kind of policy change. And as so many of these articles talk about, Trump had no policy or agenda. He other than the wall and to break things. He had a strong view about foreign policy that somehow we were being taken advantage of, but he had he didn't have apparently the intellectual capacity to grow as he learned stuff, and he wouldn't put the people in place to actually make the change. So there's this whole left left side, and Daniel Dresner is from Tufts writes this one article in which he, there's a set of people who believe that Trump was authoritarian, and we heard that every day, every morning. I'd get up and hear CNN and hear these guys. He was about to be a dictator and crush democracy, and then yet here 4 years later, there are people saying he was an incredibly weak president. He could not make the party, his own Republican Party, do stuff they didn't want to do.
I think we're because I agree that he has authoritarian tendencies, but he's not like a Mussolini who understood.
Putin. He's not like Putin
who understood
who know how to do it.
Right. They didn't. He never understood the mechanics of government. Wasn't interested in learning it, and therefore he wasn't. He didn't influence it in the way that a Mussolini did. It doesn't mean that he didn't attempt a coup. It's just that he's not good at this. So it's like, if you all want to overthrow the government, he's not your guy.
Yeah. Well, and we all know, anybody knows that in order to effect change, it requires someone to lead.
Yeah.
And leaders need followers, and they need to be in a position to execute policy in the government. And he just left hundreds and hundreds of critical policy positions unfilled, no nominations. There are people on the right who, and Trump supporters perhaps, who will say, "Oh, it's wonderful, all these judges he appointed." Well, that was McConnell's thing. That was not Trump. He embraced it, and he did what McConnell told him. But this was not Trump driving the conversation. And then, of course, now we have Biden in, and articles about how to fix Trump's damage. And the reality is 90% of everything is the same as it was before he came in. But what they did try to do at the end is and produce new regulations and this and that, midnight regulations, what we call them. Like there's a list of, one rule was published on expanding the methods of execution in federal death cases to include electrocution and death by firing squad. And they broadened the definition of independent contractors, Department of Labor, so that gig economy workers weren't protected with benefits and safety protection, all that. They have other regs to prevent immigration judges from using discretion to close cases. Others about religious discrimination and exemptions and liability and on and on and on. And one of them that dear to the heart of the right to life people is there was a ban on scientific research on certain kinds of methods that used tissue from fetuses, and these are all going to be overturned because they were last minute thoughts. The law is that if they didn't, if they happened after a date certain somewhere in August, it just took a simple majority vote of the Congress to get rid of them. And that's exactly what's going to happen. So the permanency is not in what he made. I think the permanency right now is going to be in what he broke.
Yeah.
And most of that is in foreign policy. So, the one thing he made in foreign policy was sending Jared Kushner over to the Middle East. He has struck a series of deals which are very business driven, and that will allow the Biden administration to build on that. The China thing, I think, would have been broken no matter what. Biden seemed it's so broken that whatever you do is an improvement.
He permanently changed the right, and this is the best thing that Donald Trump did, is he changed the right from a Wilsonian foreign policy of Bush towards a more Robert Taft, Ron Paul sort of. I mean, I wouldn't go as far as Ron Paul. I don't think that Trump was ever nearly as non-interventionist as Ron Paul. But he certainly started to push them towards a Rand Paul and away from a Lindsey Graham.
Well, that was his whole thing about getting rid of all the wars, and he really made big steps in that. But this is where the question is, and all of this is the age-old debate, the Wilsonian view versus the others, is that we would like to live in a world where we can do what we want to do. more or less.
Yeah.
And American citizens are respected in other countries, and we go over and we have protections. And the reality is that that requires that you find a way to use power judiciously. And that when you say you're going to do something, this as a parent, if you threaten your kid with something you're not going to do, they figure that out. So I never threatened my kids with anything that I wasn't going to do.
Right.
And nothing was so drastic or draconian that you really had to wrestle with yourself to do it. Reasonable kind of punishments or rewards or whatever. But and it's the same way with countries. If people don't believe our word, then they won't believe us in treaties, and they won't hold up their side of it. And that is where Trump failed to understand. So, yes, we would like to get out of Afghanistan. We've been there far too long. We've had far too many strategies fail. But we have also created a belief among educated Afghans and others that they should be able to form a democratic government, and they will be wiped off the face of the earth if the Taliban gets just walk right in. So this is a case of, and it's true all around the Middle East and around the planet. I mean, people don't believe us half the time. Obama, remember, drew the red line in the sand,
right,
over Syria.
I'd argue that Trump kept his word on
breaking stuff
with allies, the World Health Organization, other stuff like that. I mean, he followed through on stuff with the allies, but when it came to holding, Russia and China, you look at their position before Trump and after Trump, they're in a much better position globally than they were before Trump.
Well, China just said screw us, and they went off and formed their own equivalent of the major banking institutions. They have got their Belt and Road program all around the planet. They are lending money like crazy to these countries. They're sending their vaccine, Sinovacs everywhere, because we won't yet. So they're doing everything they can possibly do to supplant the United States. And that's not going to be a better world, in my opinion.
At all.
All.
But I'm not terribly worried about China because I don't know how they can sustain in a, it's not 1960 anymore, right? In the information age, it's harder to get away with what Mao got away with, and you look at the Uyghurs and the amount of people that are ready to abandon them and revisit the idea of the Trans-Asian partnership that Obama put together as a way to isolate the economy of China, the TPP. I think you'll see conservatives not go, if Biden wanted to put that back together, I don't think you'd see as many conservatives oppose it as they did under Obama because they want to isolate China now. They now recognize that. I think when you look at what's happening with the Uyghurs, it's just undeniable that this is a totalitarian government and that we ought not be working with them in any way, shape, or form. And people ought to be looking at Vietnam and Taiwan and other places for their goods or bringing it back here. So, I would say
that's happening. That's happening.
Absolutely. And I would say with Trump, Trump's foreign policy in a lot of ways is a continuation of Obama's foreign policy. You'll hear libertarian thinkers kind of say, oh, this guy is, libertarian on foreign policy. And that's not true in that he just continued a lot of what Obama de-escalated. Because Obama was a radical change in a lot of ways from Bush.
Oh, yes.
And Trump didn't reverse that to go back to Bush. He continued the de-escalations, yet he dropped more drone bombs. He continued troop withdrawals. He continued a lot of what Obama, and I think that's exactly where the American people are at. So when people talk about, Biden being a warmonger, but it isn't 2004 anymore. That ship has sailed. I mean, there's no appetite in the American people for war with Russia.
I think that's
or China
right.
or anywhere else.
I think you're generally right, and particularly about appetite for involvement. And this is where I think, what I was saying earlier is it's very hard to find anything that Trump did in a positive way that will have lasting impact. But the negative actions of breaking these various expected behaviors is going to be helpful to Biden, and to completely reset all of this stuff if he's smart. And I think he's actually handled most of this. There was an article about the disappearing Joe Biden somewhere I saw, and I am delighted not to have to see him or Trump every day of the week.
Yeah.
So although Biden is now mired in the same thing that Trump was mired in during his administration, which is the border.
Yeah.
And what are the expectations, and how are you going to handle these people? And
can I be honest? I mean, people running around calling this a crisis is sort of insane when I have multiple help wanted signs, and we're always told how horrible the economy is, but I don't know anybody that runs a business. Like, my dad runs a business doing marble floor restoration and construction cleanup. He hasn't been able to hire anybody in 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
Restaurants, fast food places, stores, like, it's really hard to find entry-level jobs because most people, even though unemployment's high, nobody wants to go work. So why is it a crisis when we have jobs that need filled and people who need the economic opportunity of being here? Why is this a crisis? Why are we calling this a crisis? I don't understand it.
Well, Chris, don't you think that some of this is a global phenomenon, which is that people who have been in their countries for enough time to think that they are whatever their country is, are feeling everywhere around the planet that they're somehow being invaded by people who are not like them. I think one of our broadcasts, we talked about a friend of ours who moved to Italy, married an Italian, has been in Italy for the last 40 years. And 10 years ago, I remember a conversation in which she said, the Turks have moved here, and the so-and-sos, and they've been here 2 generations, and somehow it just doesn't feel right that they're making pizza and pasta. Are they Italians or are they Turks? And the rest of the world has a very different attitude about this. Americans don't think like that, or have not historically thought like that. I mean,
until we started importing right-wing ideologies of the Great Replacement theory into the Republican Party. I mean,
I agree.
Somebody noted in Rush Limbaugh's 2 books, he didn't even mention immigration in the early 90s because it wasn't an issue until Tom Tancredo runs in 2008 and really popularizes this, and Trump seizes on it, and now it's a crisis when my family, your family, all of our families came here for an opportunity and started at I'm in the greatest population of Chin outside of Burma. And, I've just seen this entire area redevelop economically through Chinese, Vietnamese, Chin, Burmese stores. I mean, this is now a thriving part of town based on people who are in their 2nd generation of moving here and
challenges your palate.
That's exactly right. We go over to the Viet Huang store, and it's like a Kroger sized store just full of octopus and things I've never seen, and it's really cool. And
well, have you had Laotian food?
I have not. No, I didn't know that existed.
Hotter than crap.
Well, so yes, I mean, all right. So let's talk about social media censorship. So because you sent me a note.
You've been censored. I set you up on this. I am shocked.
I'm being oppressed.
Shocked that you have been banned from Facebook. Tell me, I don't get it.
Well,
you're such a sweet guy. I've never heard you issue a curse word, unlike me.
I'm the bad boy of libertarianism. What can I say? I'm a danger to the republic. I'm a threat.
Side I've never seen, Chris.
I know. So, all right. I outlined it kind of in length on the last episode, but the short version of it is that starting in 2018, I saw everything kind of heading this way. I'm like, okay, Facebook doesn't want politics on their platform because they don't want the divisiveness, and they don't want, if politics is on their platform, then Ron Wyden and Josh Hawley get a seat at the table, and they don't want that. And because if they get regulated, that means all of their code has to go into the congressional record. So they're now really they ramped it up since the end of the election.
Not technically, but I get your point.
Yes, right. There's going to be a lot more transparency that they don't want, especially Facebook. So, and this is not just a happening to me or my group or the libertarians. It's happening to, my work Facebook group for the Bob and Tom Show, which is a comedy radio show. It's happening to the Pat Down podcast group, which is full of Democrats, 10,000 people. The Bob and Tom one is full of, non-political and right-leaning people, 20,000 people. The We Are Libertarians group was libertarians at 2,500 people. And I've talked to admins that it's happening all over the place. And so what's happening on Facebook specifically, but Instagram too and all their products, is memes seem to be the culprit. And they are now fact-checking memes. They're fact-checking funny pictures. They're fact-checking articles from all news outlets. You can't post, like I didn't know that this was some fake news website, like the InfoWars type website. I posted a link showing, hey, here's this video of this thing, and it said, you don't have permission to post this website. You can't post InfoWars or Gateway Pundit. You can't post any of those more egregious websites because they've blocked the link to post those in comments or on your timeline. So you can't post fake news, right?
Right.
Except you do post fake news all the time if you run a Facebook group or your own group, because if you posted something in January about election results, let's say you posted the Dispatch, a fact-checking partner of Facebook, because this happened to me, saying this is not what happened with the Wisconsin dip in numbers after the election was stolen. I'll post that in November saying, here's this fact. In December or February, I get a fake news label on that because some facts have changed. If you post a Washington Post article, a few months later, you will get a false news notification and a community guidelines strike for fake news because some facts have changed, as they do in the news business. We've updated this to show this or that, right? If you post Fox News or any of that, you are definitely getting community guideline strikes. If you post right-leaning news about, anything pro-Trump, you're going to get a community guideline strike. And so after January 6th, especially, they ramped that up where it was 10 to 15 a week in the Facebook group, on my personal account, on our big page. And so I just said to all of our team, hey, we're just not going to post anything to the 100,000 Facebook page that We Are Libertarians has. We're not going to post memes. We're not going to post statuses. We're just going to post links to the podcasts. And we haven't gotten in any trouble on that, right? So we self-censored to just post links to the website. And our engagement has gone from 1 million a month to 70,000 a month. So I've gone from people seeing the brand name We Are Libertarians podcast network 1 million times a month to 70,000 times a month with no engagement on any of those posts. I've got an asset I can't use. Same thing on Instagram. I can't use Instagram because I don't want to lose the 20,000 asset. I've had to self-censor that too. So, our Facebook group is all about trying to bring different groups of people together to model having conversations and finding disagreements and agreements of, you're a different type of libertarian than Rimzo or Brian or me or anybody else, right? But you deserve to have a voice. We want to hear what you have to say. We want to understand. Facebook doesn't want that, and so I got banned for a meme that was just very silly and goofy in the private Facebook group of 2,500 people with my same sense of humor, of Jeffrey Dahmer at Five Guys saying, this doesn't taste like Five Guys. And that was
Jesus Christ.
that was the one that took it down. But it had come at the end of, and I have to just kind of go, all right, this doesn't fit Facebook's community guidelines. I had no idea. But I just figured if I post this to my community of people that are like-minded like me, it fits our community guidelines. Who are they to tell us that we can't, so it's just sort of insane.
So they're now against sick humor.
Yes, but it isn't just that. It's
black humor.
If any humor, any political humor, any you don't know what you're going to get.
Are people complaining across the board now about this? Is this, of course, this is the problem of having private companies in the business of censorship,
right?
And they are. We've talked about this before too. They really are now platforms. They're really, and if that's going to be the case, I think they're pushing the envelope on being regulated by the government. They are
already.
And I saw this ad. Facebook has said it's time to update the regulations. That's
of course, because
approach.
If they get regulated, they get their position isn't cemented. I mean, what's happening is really analogous to when I started radio in 2004 as a board op, and I said "scumbag" on the air, and the PD said, "That's a condom. You can't say that."
I never heard that till you told me that.
Literally nobody ever has. And I go, so can you tell me what the rules are? And he goes, no, I can't. And so,
he'll know it when he sees it.
Exactly right. It's a little old church lady writing in saying, I heard this thing and it was offensive and we need to find them. I mean, my whole radio career from 2004 to this day, working on a radio show, is self-censorship and what can and can't we do and who can. But it's much harder now because those little old church ladies in 2004 have now partnered with the Gen Z crowd that forgets the free speech crackdowns. Like boomer liberals remember the Iraq War lead up. They remember the censorship that took place in 2004. They don't. The younger folks don't have the same frame of reference as that, and so they have engaged in the same illiberal behavior as a lot of the right does. And so, when I hear the Trump and the right are the great defenders of free speech, I roll my eyes and go, not in 2004, and not in radio, and not when Michael Powell and Bush were leading the FCC. Like you're the same censorial crowd as everybody else. So it is a bummer, but I will say that as a person who's worked in media, I started in a job that no longer exists called board op, and I now work at doing things that didn't exist then. I mean, podcasting and video editing were not a thing in my industry 20 years ago. I will innovate. We will innovate out of this. It sucks to lose my biggest marketing tool. Oh, and at the same time, the very same week, coincidentally, Rob, we can no longer post or stream to our YouTube channel.
And why is that?
Because of playing in January a news clip of a QAnon group and denouncing it in our audio, but they said that was promoting them. And then we got another one for spam, which I don't understand at all. And I have no idea what the second strike was for, but we can't go live on Facebook, live on YouTube. When we go live on our Saturday morning show, I don't know what I need to fix to keep my YouTube channel. If I get one more, I lose the YouTube channel. But
now, are there processes in place to appeal this? And by the way, I have never used Facebook. I am not on Facebook. I just, as a matter of personal privilege, I refuse to put myself out on those things. So, although I guess I was with you without realizing it, but is there an appeals process?
Not really. So like on Facebook, I've appealed to reinstate the Facebook group. I can appeal my ban. Sometimes they will tell you what it is and you can appeal it. Like the Jeffrey Dahmer meme, like, okay, you got me. Like I deserve the 7-day ban. Now I know that I'm not supposed to post this, but like I had it's fairly harmless, right? Like it's really kind of a dumb joke, and it's in a private group. You can sit there and argue, it's their property, and if they want to take it down, they can. But like it kind of stretches the bounds of common sense. Like, what's really the problem with that meme in a private space? You're being too hard-headed about it, and that's mainly because they want to drive me off the platform. What they are doing to fellow libertarians is that they are frustrating you off the platform. You can appeal it, and they may let your group come back. They may let our group come back if the appeal is upheld, but they're going to shut it down again and again more frequently. They're going to tag you with a community guideline strike to the point that you no longer use your Facebook page.
So those guys, the tech guys, and their staffs, and more realistically, their algorithms are the new swamp.
In a lot of ways, absolutely. They are just they're just another version of control that you have in this side. But well,
it's more faceless because it's a mathematical equation.
I appealed
it does it in the first place.
Yeah, I appealed our strike. Exactly. Nobody reported any of this stuff. There were multiple groups that apparently got taken down for the same Dahmer meme. But the appeals were both rejected on the YouTube channel. We've never had a strike. We've never had a community guideline strike. We are not an offensive brand. We are trying to model good behavior. We are like the David French of the libertarian movement. Like, we are not out there talking about, AIDS is attached to the coronavirus and it's all a hoax. Don't wear your face diaper stuff. You know what I mean? Like, so I think it's shaken a lot of the other libertarian podcasters who are more edgy, where they're like, wow, they're trying to do the right thing and do all this the right way, then what hope do we have? And I just think that's the problem with censorship. Tell everybody else.
Maybe it's time for you to write a piece for the New York Times and or the Washington Post. The Post would be better because Facebook cares much more about what the Post says.
Okay.
And you might even do a parallel piece for the Wall Street Journal, and I suspect you could get it covered.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that it started with the hackers and the sex workers with Sesta and Fosta. And then it went to like the fringier conspiracy people. And now 2 years later, we're to the libertarians and Republicans, and not even the fringe libertarians and Republicans. People like me who are moderate and centrist libertarians who are just trying to start an independent brand and can't. I mean, my ability to really, like, my dream is being a talk radio show host, crap the bed now, so I try to build my own, and that's crap the bed, and you just go, all right, I'll just go be a history teacher. I don't know.
I had the feeling you'll survive.
I will. I'm not being oppressed.
You'll beat that swamp too. So
that's the thing. Like, I'm not being oppressed and I'm not being canceled. It's, if you work in media, if you were a journalist, if you work in the creative arts, tech, it's the same way. You have to innovate. You have to be pivotable at a moment's notice. Like I said, the stuff that I was doing in 2004 doesn't exist and didn't exist, and you always have to innovate, and this is just a setback. I'm not going away. I'm not going anywhere, but it does make it harder, and it is frustrating, and it's their loss because something else will come along to replace these people. Because if you take me, number 19 million on Facebook, your biggest super fan, built a career off of loving and using your product, and now I hate you. And I tell all the people that listen to me that I hate you, then you are not. And
now today you're telling all the people who hate the swamp the same thing.
These companies can't last with their biggest fans turning into their biggest haters. They won't. It's something else will come along, just like podcasting came along due to radio censorship. It's going to happen.
Yep. There are a lot of things happening. It's going to be much more activity in that space, I predict. So
yeah.
So I suspect we're coming to the end of our time here.
We're at the end.
We talked about food at the beginning.
Yes.
And I can't say that I've had much food in Washington lately. Although I had a great dinner last night at a restaurant in Richmond called Alewife, and up on Churchill, which is one of the oldest sections of Richmond. It's a great city and a great area. So when you come down, Chris, we'll take you over there.
I'd love to. Yeah, we'll have to. Me and the missus will have to pack up and come down and visit you now that you're all vaccinated.
That's right. Vaxxed.
Ready to party. All right, Rob, it was great talking to you.
Good. All righty. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you to listening to the Chris Spangle Show, and we'll talk to you soon. You're listening to the We Are Libertarians podcast network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com, like The Chris Spangle Show, Liberty Explained, The Brian Nichols Show, The Boss Hog of Liberty, Freedom Strips with Keaton Tucker, On the Run with Rimzo Martinez, Gingerarchy with Tricia Stewart-Mann, Upward, Libertarian Activism, and Now Hear This. Tune in now and we're going to help you sound smarter when talking with your friends.